It's a gray day outside. I got a gray shirt, gray pants. But the topic is not gray, so let's get into it. I gotta tell you guys, the more I get into art, the more I love the paradox of it. And I like to bring those things to the table because it really is a balancing act. See, last week I said something along the lines of, there comes a time in your art where it's not even worth the effort to add to it because you're at a stage where you're putting off shipment in order to give in to fear. So this week, I need you to get it out the door. Get it out the door. Whatever it is you've been stalling on, it's time to let it loose because it is no longer serving you to hold on to it. I need you to finish it, I need you to ship it, and I need you to move on to the next thing. And this week, I'm going to jump to the other side of that. And I want to do that by telling you a story about the job I have. See, just kind of by default, I ended up doing a little bit of graphic design work. And at first, I didn't really know what I was doing. And then I started getting into it and building different stuff and better stuff and new stuff. And I was really kind of pleased with where I was. But I got to a point where I was plateauing, right? Like my stuff wasn't as good as it was before. And I was giving it to feedback for my team, right? And I wasn't getting the kind of interaction I was before. So you know what happened? Instead, I had to find other designers in the building. Why? Because I had reached a point where my team members couldn't give me the feedback they needed to get the work to the next level. Listen, the example I always think of is C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, right? These guys were best friends and they gave each other feedback all the time. And sometimes C.S. Lewis would say stuff like, dude, this dialogue is garbage. And you need that in your life. You need someone who is going to hold you to the standard you deserve to be at. Don't be lazy. Find the person, get them to break you, and then make the work that you are capable of making. Trying to get this all in before Francis wakes up. This week's question of the week comes from Diana, and Diana says, I've got a book in my head. I've written some of it on Facebook, but how do I put a whole book together? Okay, Diana, I think this question is super relevant because most people think they can write a book, but few people actually do, right? So like, what's the gap? What's happening there between idea and the actual getting into it? And it turns out that writing a book is so hard. I can't even explain to you, like there's so many mental hurdles to leap. It's like, you know what it's like? It's like writing a blog post, but you can only write one sentence for a year. And you have to keep the same tone, the same voice, the same ideas, the same principles through all of that. And it's just so overwhelming at times. So I want to put this in clear terms because I think it's easy to get lost in like themes and concepts and ideas and plots and the hero's journey. But if you've never written a book before, the process for me is pretty much this: the vomit draft, the structure draft, and then the fancy draft. And so that is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Whenever you're doing that first draft, literally sit down and get it all out. And this is because you have to overcome that voice that tells you it's crap, because it's gonna be crap for a while, but just sit down and get it done. That's going to take a couple of months. And then there's the structure draft, which I would go back high level, look at what you have, define the sections, and then cut the things that do and don't work. Now, this is easier to do because you're not lost in the paragraphs. You need to see it from a high level and say, okay, this fits, this doesn't really fit. And the final draft is that finesse draft. I will not edit a single sentence until I have a whole book finished. And then I won't edit most sentences until I have the structure kind of laid out. And then and only then do I go back and write great sentences, right? So that's the process for me. If you're just getting started, vomit, structure, and then fancy. This week's artist spotlight goes on Howard Gardner. Now, you guys are hearing that. You don't know that name, I'm pretty sure, but you probably know of his colleague, whose name I cannot pronounce, but he wrote the book Flow, and he came up with this big idea that somewhere between anxiety and boredom is flow. That's the other guy. What Howard Gardner did is elucidate the life of the creative person on a high level. So he took 7 folks, which I call the big 7: Gandhi, Picasso, Freud, Einstein, Martha Graham, Stravinsky, and T.S. Eliot, and he looked at their lives and tried to find the commonalities. And I will, of course, link this book up below. It is a huge read, but it is so insightful. If you've ever wondered how ideas happen, how medium creative people become incredibly creative people, or how the most outstanding folks in their field become what they are, this is the book to read. If you've ever wanted to do art at all, you have to read this book. It's a very scientific look at the spark that happens in all of us. Thank you so much for watching episode 61. Before you go, answer this Ask the Audience. Which side do you err on? Do you err on the side of you get too much stuff out the door and you might do work that's not the best quality? Or do you hold on to stuff for too long? Which side is the side that you fall on? Let me know in the comments down below. I'll be sure to answer. For me, gotta say, I sometimes rush things out before they're ready. I'm working on it. I'm Todd B from Tennessee. Thanks so much for watching. Give a thumbs up if you like this show, and I will talk with you next week.